Samuel had lived alone on his ranch for so many years that even he sometimes forgot what it felt like to share a roof with another person. 8 years had passed since anyone had stayed the night on his land. His days were filled with chores, quiet thoughts, and long silences that stretched from one sunrise to the next. When he woke each morning, the only sounds were the rustle of dry grass, the snorting of horses from the barn, and the wind brushing across the open fields. It was a peaceful life, but it was also an empty one. Samuel never complained, but loneliness often sat on his shoulders like a heavy coat he could never take off. That evening had started like any other. The sky had turned the color of embers, the sun dropping behind the distant hills. Samuel had finished repairing a broken fence and feeding the livestock. He planned to warm some stew on the stove and then sit near the fireplace, listening to the crackling logs while the cold night wrapped around the old wooden house. Winter had arrived earlier than usual, and the wind carried a sharp bite that stung the skin and made the boards of his home creak. As he walked toward the barn to check on the horses one last time, the air grew even colder. Snowflakes drifted down, at first gentle and scattered, then heavier and faster. The storm came out of nowhere, hiding the moon and darkening the whole valley. Samuel pulled his coat tighter around him and pushed forward, the snow crunching under his boots. He kept his eyes low, shielding them from the icy wind, till something made him stop. There were footprints in the snow, small, light, and fresh. They were not from any animal he recognized. A horse left deep marks, a coyote left narrow ones. But these were different, human, barely visible, almost swept away by the wind. But definitely human footsteps. Samuel felt a sudden alertness rise inside him. Out here, people rarely walked this far without reason, and no one traveled barefoot in weather like this. He followed the tracks slowly, stepping carefully through the snow. The wind howled, making distant branches shake and groan. For a long moment he thought maybe the storm was playing tricks on him, till he saw something move near the barn, a small shape hunched in the shadows. "Hello?" Samuel called, his voice steady but cautious. He stepped closer, keeping his hands visible. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The figure shifted and a soft, trembling voice answered him.
"Please."
"I mean no harm." As Samuel moved closer, his lantern light revealed her, a young woman wrapped in a thin blanket, her hair wet with snow, her face pale from the cold. Her clothes were worn, her feet cut and bruised from walking through rough ground. She looked exhausted, as if she had pushed herself far beyond her limits. Samuel's breath caught. She was clearly freezing, and her legs wobbled as she tried to stand. Instinct moved faster than thought. He stepped toward her and held out his hand. "You shouldn't be out in this storm," he said gently. "Come inside. You're freezing." The woman hesitated, as if unsure whether she could trust him. Her dark eyes studied his face, searching for any sign of danger. Finally, she whispered, "My name is Nayeli. I am Apache. I was trying to reach my family's winter camp, but I lost the trail." Her voice cracked, the cold making each word tremble. Samuel nodded, offering the calm assurance he wished someone would have given him long ago. "My name is Samuel. You're safe here. Let's get you warm." Nayeli tried to step forward, but her knees buckled. Samuel caught her lightly, careful not to startle her, supporting only enough weight to keep her from falling. She swallowed hard, clearly embarrassed by her weakness. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I have been walking since yesterday morning. I thought I could make it. But the cold you don't need to explain," he said softly. "Anyone would struggle in this weather." He guided her toward the house, slow and steady. She leaned slightly on him, shivering violently as the wind whipped across the open yard. By the time they reached the porch, her lips were nearly blue. Inside the house, warmth greeted them in a gentle wave. Samuel hurried to add more logs to the fire. The flames rose higher, lighting the room with a soft orange glow. He brought a thick wool blanket from his bedroom and draped it around Nayeli's shoulders. She held it tightly, trying to stop her shaking. "Sit near the fire," Samuel said, pulling a chair close. "You need to warm up slowly." Nayeli obeyed, lowering herself carefully onto the chair. Her hands shook as she held them toward the fire. She looked fragile, as if one cold gust could blow her away. Samuel filled a cup with warm water. He didn't give anything too hot, knowing sudden heat could hurt someone chilled so deeply, and handed it to her. She cupped the warm drink between her palms, absorbing the heat. Her eyes softened in relief. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know if I would survive another hour." Samuel pulled another chair nearby, keeping a respectful distance. "How long have you been walking in the cold?" "Since the storm began," she said weakly. "I lost my group. I tried to follow the hills, but everything looked different in the snow. I thought I saw smoke in the distance. Maybe from your chimney. I followed it. That smoke saved you," Samuel said. "You made the right choice." Her eyes met his for a moment, grateful and tired. The storm outside roared louder, shaking the house with powerful gusts. Snow piled against the windows, and the world beyond turned into a swirling white blur. Samuel knew they were trapped inside for the night. There was no chance she could continue her journey until the storm passed. Nayeli's shivering grew worse. Even with the blanket and fire, Samuel noticed her fingers were still stiff and pale. "You're still too cold," he said with concern. "The fire helps, but it may not be enough." She lowered her gaze, her voice quiet and full of fear. "The cold, it is inside me. I can feel it in my bones." Samuel understood. He had seen frostbite and cold sickness before. He knew the signs. If she didn't warm up fully, she could slip into a dangerous state. Nayeli looked down at her trembling hands, then slowly lifted her eyes to his. She spoke very softly, almost ashamed to ask, "Samuel, I know this is your home and you owe me nothing, but please, I need warmth. Real warmth. If I sleep alone tonight, I may not wake." Her request was not bold. It was not personal. It was fear, honest fear, of the cold stealing her life. Samuel felt his chest tighten. He didn't know what to say at first. He hadn't shared his home, his room, or even a simple closeness with another person for nearly a decade. His life had been built on routine and distance. But this wasn't about comfort or discomfort. It was about survival. "You don't have to be afraid," Samuel said softly. "I'll help you. You're safe with me." She nodded, relief softening her tense expression. He prepared the bed with extra blankets, making a warm space but keeping everything respectful and safe. His actions were calm, deliberate, and careful. Nayeli watched him quietly, her eyes showing gratitude mixed with exhaustion. When she lay down, her shivering still hadn't stopped. Samuel lay beside her only to share warmth, careful to give her space, turning his back to give her comfort and privacy. The simple closeness, the shared heat beneath layers of blankets, slowly eased her trembling. Bit by bit, her breathing steadied. Hours passed in silence, the storm continuing its angry roar outside. Samuel remained alert, checking that she was breathing evenly, making sure she stayed warm enough. Sometimes he heard her whisper softly, thanking him even in half-dashed sleep, in that quiet darkness. Samuel realized something he had not felt in years: the warmth of another human nearby. The simple reminder that life was not meant to be lived entirely alone. Nayeli finally drifted into deep sleep, safe and warm at last. Samuel stayed awake a little longer, listening to the storm fade into the distance, knowing that this unexpected night would change his lonely life in ways he could not yet imagine. Morning came slowly, with a gray light pushing through the frost-covered window. The storm had not fully stopped, but it was weaker now. The wind still hissed outside, and the cold still pressed against the walls, but the worst of the night had passed. Inside, the warmth from the fireplace had spread through the small house. Making the air gentler and easier to breathe, Samuel opened his eyes first. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was or why he wasn't alone in his bed. Then the memories of the night returned. Nayeli's frozen condition, her trembling voice, her exhaustion, and how close she had come to collapsing in the snow. He turned his head slightly and looked at her. She was sleeping peacefully now, wrapped tightly in the blankets. Her breathing was steady, no longer uneven or shallow. The tension in her face had softened, and the deep shiver that had held her body captive seemed to be gone. Samuel watched her quietly, making sure she was still warm enough. He didn't move much, not wanting to wake her, not wanting to let any cold air sneak under the blankets. She had survived the night. That thought alone brought a strange relief to his chest. Last night, he had acted on instinct and duty, but now he realized how close things had been. Out here, a night like that could take a life. If she had not found his ranch, she might have fallen in the snow with no one to hear her voice or see her face again. The idea bothered him more than he expected. After a little while, Nayeli stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft morning light. She looked confused for a moment, as if she didn't know where she was. Then she saw Samuel sitting at the edge of the bed, pulling on his boots. She spoke in a quiet, sleepy voice. "You stayed awake long?" Samuel shook his head gently. "No, I slept some. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." A look of gratitude filled her eyes, warm and sincere. "I am alive because of you," she whispered. "I know that." Samuel didn't know how to respond to something so honest. He simply nodded and stood up. "The fire is still strong. I'll warm some water and bring you something to drink. Don't get up too fast." She tried to move, but winced slightly, her muscles still stiff from the cold. She lay back down for a moment, breathing slowly as the warmth of the blankets continued to spread through her limbs. Samuel stepped outside the room and walked to the small kitchen area. He filled a pot with water and placed it over the fire. Then he checked the woodpile, adding a few logs to make sure the heat stayed steady. When he returned with the warm drink, Nayeli was already trying to sit up. "Careful," he said softly. "Your body's still waking up." She held the cup with both hands, absorbing the heat through her cold palms. The simple warmth seemed to comfort her deeply. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the feeling settle inside her. "It has been a long time," she murmured, "since someone cared for me without asking anything in return." Samuel said nothing. He didn't help her for any reward. He helped her because no person should face death alone in the cold. But hearing her say it made him realize how rare such kindness might have been in her life lately. After drinking slowly, Nayeli tried to stand. Samuel reached out to steady her, but she lifted a hand gently, showing she wanted to try on her own. She managed to stand, though her legs shook slightly. "I am better," she said, breathing out in relief. "You're not fully recovered," Samuel replied calmly. "But you're safe." She walked slowly to the fire, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She sat down near it, letting the heat warm her from the front as the blanket warmed her from the back. Samuel prepared a small breakfast, nothing fancy, just eggs, bread, and warm broth, but it was enough for someone who had nearly frozen. As they ate, Nayeli told him more about her journey. She had left her people to carry a message to another group. There were tensions rising over land and hunting rights, and she wanted to warn her family and prevent misunderstandings. But the storm had forced her off the path. She had walked for hours, praying she would find shelter. "I thought I would die in that snow," she said, staring into the flames. "I truly believed it." "You're stronger than you think," Samuel replied. "Most people would have given up long before reaching my ranch." She smiled softly. "I didn't have a choice. I had to keep moving. My family needs me." Samuel respected that. He saw a quiet strength in her, a determination that reminded him of the old stories his father used to tell about people who refused to surrender to the harsh land. But the truth was simple. Even strong people reach their limits. And last night, Nayeli had reached hers. After breakfast, Samuel checked the weather. The storm was still lingering, though not as fierce as before. Travel would be dangerous, cold winds, slippery ground, low visibility. He returned to Nayeli and said, "You can't leave today. Not in this weather." Nayeli looked toward the frosted window and nodded reluctantly. "I know. I can feel the cold in my bones still. My legs are weak. You can stay here as long as you need," Samuel said. Her eyes softened, and she lowered her head slightly. "Thank you. I will not forget this." The rest of the day passed slowly but peacefully. Nayeli rested often, trying to regain her strength. Samuel continued his chores, feeding his horses, checking the fences, shoveling snow away from the doors. Each time he came back inside, he found her watching the fire or looking quietly out the window. Once, She spoke without turning her head. You live here alone? Yes, Samuel answered simply. For how long? 8 years. She turned to him then, studying his face carefully. That is a long time to live without company. I got used to it, he said, though his voice carried a hint of truth he couldn't hide. Loneliness had become a silent companion he never spoke about. Nayeli nodded slowly. But no one gets used to being alone forever. Her words echoed in his mind long after she fell quiet again. Later that afternoon, Samuel brought her one of his coats, thicker than the blanket. She stood up slowly as he placed it around her shoulders. The coat nearly swallowed her, but it warmed her instantly. She held the collar close to her neck, smiling warmly. It smells like pine, she said softly. Like the forest after rain. It's from the firewood, Samuel replied, almost embarrassed. It is a good smell, she said, around evening. The storm outside grew worse again, and Samuel added more wood to the fire. Nahal's cheeks were much warmer now, her voice steadier, her movements stronger. But the real cold, the cold that had sunk deep into her bones, was still fading slowly. Samuel knew the night would be difficult again. Even with warmth, a body weakened by frost needed close care to recover. Nayeli could feel it too. She sat near the fire with her hands on her knees, and her voice trembled as she spoke. Samuel, tonight will be hard again. You have done so much already, but I fear I may get cold once more when the fire dies down. Samuel nodded. We'll keep the fire burning all night. May not be enough, she whispered, ashamed to admit it. Last night, I barely made it. If I sleep far from warmth again, the cold might catch me. Her words were not bold or uncomfortable. They were filled with fear from someone who had felt death brushing close. Samuel didn't hesitate this time. I won't let that happen. You know that? She looked at him, eyes shining with quiet relief. You are a good man, Samuel. That night, Samuel made the bed warm again with extra blankets. Nayeli moved carefully, tired, but no longer shaking as fiercely. Samuel gave her space, as he had before, keeping everything respectful and safe. The closeness was only to protect her from the cold. She breathed easier as the warmth settled around her. She whispered a soft thank you into the dark, and Samuel, lying quietly, said only rest. You're safe. And for the first time in years, Samuel did not feel the heavy silence of a lonely home. There was another heartbeat in the room, another presence in the quiet night. It was strange, unexpected, and yet strangely comforting, as the storm roared outside. The small wooden house held a warmth that went beyond fire or blankets. Warmth of trust between two lives that had crossed paths at the edge of danger, and both of them felt, deep inside, that this night, like the one before, was changing something in ways neither fully understood yet. Morning arrived more gently than the day before. The storm had almost faded, leaving only soft flakes drifting down from a quiet sky. The air was still cold, but it no longer threatened to cut through the walls or steal the breath from anyone who stepped outside. Inside the house, peaceful warmth lingered from the fire Samuel had kept burning through most of the night. Samuel woke first again. He sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Nayeli, who was sleeping with her face half hidden beneath the blankets. Her breathing was steady, warm, and calm. She looked far better than when she had arrived at his ranch, less frightened, less tense. Her body no longer shook, and the deep exhaustion that had clouded her eyes seemed to have lifted at last. Samuel quietly slipped out of the bed and added more wood to the fire. He warmed some water and prepared a simple breakfast. The smell of food eventually woke Nayeli, and she opened her eyes, blinking slowly. When she realized where she was, a small, peaceful smile appeared on her face. You kept the fire going? She said softly. Couldn't let it go out, Samuel replied. Still cold enough to freeze water outside. She sat up carefully, stretching her arms. I feel much better today. My body is not heavy anymore. That's good, Samuel said. You needed rest. Nayeli wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and walked to the small table where Samuel had placed breakfast. She picked up a warm cup and held it near her face, breathing in the steam with relief. As she sipped, her eyes softened. You have taken care of me like family, she said. like someone who has known me for years. Samuel didn't know how to respond. He had acted out of kindness, instinct, and a sense of responsibility. But hearing her say the word family stirred something inside him. He hadn't heard that word spoken in his home for a long time. He cleared his throat and said quietly, "Anyone would have done the same." Nayeli replied gently, "Not everyone would. Not everyone opens their door to strangers in a storm. Not everyone shares warmth, food, and comfort without asking why or who I am. You did all this without hesitation." Samuel looked down at his hands. He wasn't used to praise or emotional words. "You needed help. That's all." Nayeli studied him for a moment. She seemed to understand that he meant well, even if he couldn't express himself easily. After breakfast, Samuel went outside to check the animals and shovel snow away from the barn door. Nayeli followed him after a while, wearing the thick coat he had given her. She walked slowly, still regaining her strength. But the cold no longer hurt her as before. The sky was pale and quiet, the mountains covered in a soft blanket of white. The air was crisp, but the sun peeked through thin clouds, promising a gentler day ahead. "It is beautiful here," Nayeli said, looking around with calm eyes. Samuel nodded. "It's been home for a long time. Live with the wind in the mountains," she said, admiring the open land. "It must be peaceful." "It is," Samuel replied. "But quiet can feel heavy sometimes." Nayeli tilted her head slightly. 8 years is a long time to listen to only the wind. Samuel didn't answer, but she could see the truth in his silence. She stepped closer to the fence and stroked the nose of one of his horses. The animal leaned into her touch, peaceful and trusting, and she smiled. Samuel watched her for a moment, surprised by how gentle she was with the horses. They usually didn't warm up to strangers so quickly. "They like you," he said. "Horses understand hearts better than people," she replied. "If they trust you, it means you carry no harm." Samuel wasn't used to compliments, especially one that felt as honest as that, but he didn't argue. Instead, he helped her feed the animals, showing her where the hay was stored and how he kept things organized. She listened with interest, asking questions about the work he did every day as they talked. Their words began to flow more easily, like to people who had known each other longer than 24 hours. Later, they walked back inside to warm their hands near the fire. Nayeli sat quietly for a while and looked up at him with a thoughtful expression. "I must tell you something," she said softly. "Something important." Samuel turned toward her, concern in his eyes. "What is it?" She took a deep breath before speaking. "I was not only traveling home, I was carrying a message. A warning. There are tensions rising near our lands. My people and another group have had disagreements about hunting trails. They want peace, but misunderstandings can grow into conflict quickly." Samuel listened carefully. "I was supposed to reach my family before the winter storms," she continued. "But I became lost. And then the cold almost took my life if you didn't find my ranch." Samuel murmured. "I would not be here," she said, finishing his thought. "You've saved more than my life, Samuel. If I do not deliver my message, my people may face trouble they are not prepared for." Samuel leaned back slightly, thinking. He understood now why she had pushed herself through the storm. Her journey wasn't simple. It wasn't personal. It carried responsibility, urgency, and danger. "Then you need to reach your family soon," he said gently. "Yes," she replied, "but my body is not ready yet. My legs still ache. My feet burn when I walk too far. I need one more day." "You can stay as long as you need," Samuel said without hesitation. Nayeli's eyes warmed. "Thank you. You always answer with kindness." That afternoon, they talked more, this time about lighter things. Nayeli told him stories about her childhood, about running with her brothers along riverbanks, learning to track animals, and practicing songs her grandmother had taught her. Her voice carried a warmth that filled the room, as if her memories brought heat with them. Samuel listened with quiet interest. It had been years since someone told stories in his home. Years since laughter floated through the air. He found himself wanting her words to continue, wanting the sound of another human voice to stay longer. In return, Samuel shared small parts of his own life. His parents, the ranch, the long days working alone, the silent nights. He didn't talk in detail. He never had many words for himself, but Nayeli listened with genuine care, nodding softly when he spoke. "You have carried much on your own," she said gently. "I guess I have," he replied. "Didn't think about it much." "People who carry heavy loads often don't notice how heavy they are," she said. Her words stayed with him. Evening came, and the sky turned orange behind the mountains. The storm clouds were gone now, leaving a clear horizon. Samuel lit the lanterns and checked the fire. Keeping the room warm, Nayeli sat near the window, looking out at the peaceful landscape. "The land looks safe now," she said. "But inside me, it doesn't feel like time to leave yet." Samuel looked at her with quiet understanding. "Your body isn't ready. Another night of rest will help." She nodded slowly, and, "My heart is not ready either." Samuel's breath caught slightly. He didn't fully understand what she meant not yet, but he felt the weight behind her words. She turned from the window and looked at him directly, her expression soft and sincere. "Last night, when I slept, I felt something I have not felt in many seasons. I felt safe, truly safe, like the cold could not reach me." Samuel lowered his gaze, deeply moved but unsure how to respond. She continued, her voice quiet but honest. "I know you gave me warmth for survival, but your presence made the night less frightening. I am grateful more than words can say." Samuel swallowed, feeling something shift inside him. A gentle warmth knot from the fire moved through his chest. After 8 long years of silence, someone had spoken to him with depth, trust, and heartfelt gratitude. Nayeli stood slowly and walked toward him. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, not bold, not uncomfortable, only respectful and thankful. "You helped me live," she whispered. "I will never forget that, Samuel." He met her eyes, and in that moment, the quiet room felt alive, filled with something warm and new. Something growing slowly, like embers turning to flame. The wind outside settled into a soft hush. Inside, 2 people from different worlds shared a silence that felt meaningful, not empty, for the first time in many years. Samuel felt his lonely home change softly, quietly. Deeply, he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew he wanted her to see it. The morning of the 4th day rose softly, with a golden light touching the tops of the snowy hills. The storm was gone at last. The sky was clear, the air sharp but calm, and the world outside Samuel's house looked like a quiet painting still, bright and peaceful. It was the kind of morning that made every sound sharper, every breath colder, every thought louder. Samuel woke before the sun had fully risen. He sat up slowly, listening to the steady breathing beside him. Nayeli was still asleep, wrapped in the warm blankets, her face resting calmly against the pillow. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her breathing no longer carried the heaviness of exhaustion. She looked stronger, healthier, and at peace. He watched her for a moment, not out of boldness, but with quiet gratitude. In only a few days, this woman who had arrived frozen and lost had filled his silent home with warmth. He didn't know he had been missing. Her presence, her stories, her calm way of talking, everything had softened the house in a way nothing else had in years. But he also knew something else. Today she would have to choose whether to stay longer or continue her journey. Samuel stood up, quietly, and added more wood to the fire. The flames rose with a soft crackle, lighting the room with a warm glow. He prepared water for tea and stepped outside for a moment. The cold air met him instantly, crisp enough to sting his nose. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked to the barn to feed the animals. The sky beyond the hills was brightening, hinting that the day would be clear. When he returned inside, Nayeli was awake. Sitting up slowly with the blankets still wrapped around her, she looked toward him with gentle eyes. "Good morning, Samuel," she said softly. "Morning," he replied. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she answered. "I slept deeply. I feel strong today." She paused and pressed a hand to her chest. Warm inside again. Samuel nodded quietly. "I'm glad." She stood up slowly, stretching her arms. The blanket slipped down her shoulders, and she held it close again as she walked toward the table. Samuel poured her a cup of warm tea, and she accepted it with a grateful smile. For a few moments, they sat together in silence, sipping the warm drink. The room was calm, the fire steady, and the sunlight began to spill in through the frosted window. Nayeli set her cup down gently and let out a long breath. Samuel sensed the meaning behind it, the weight of travel, duty, and choices waiting for her. "I must decide today," she said quietly. "My family needs the message I carry. If I delay too long, they may not be prepared." Samuel's fingers tightened slightly around his cup. He knew this moment was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. "You're strong enough to travel now," he said, "but you don't have to rush. You can wait until the sun is high." Nayeli nodded. "I will leave before evening. The trail will be easier in daylight." Her words settled between them like a soft sadness. Not painful, not harsh, just the gentle ache of two lives touching for a moment and then moving apart. Samuel finished his tea and stood up to prepare the horse she would take. As he stepped outside, he heard Nayeli quietly fold the blankets and tidy the bed. When he returned a little later, she was standing by the window, watching the sunlight settle on the snow-covered valley. "You have a beautiful land," she said without turning. "Strong and quiet." "Thank you," Samuel replied. "It gave me life again," she said. "And so did you." She turned slowly to face him. Her eyes held warmth, gratitude, and something deeper, something she didn't try to hide. "I never expected kindness from a stranger," she said. "But you gave me more than shelter. You gave me trust. You shared your home when the world outside wanted to take my breath." Samuel didn't know what to say. Words felt too small. Nayeli stepped closer. "I will always remember that." He swallowed slowly. "I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you found my ranch." She smiled gently. "I think I was meant to." After a quiet breakfast, Samuel walked outside to saddle the calmest horse he owned, a gentle mare with steady steps. He brushed her coat, checked the straps, and made sure the saddle was secure. Nayeli came outside, wrapped in the thick coat he had given her. Her breath forming small clouds in the cold air, she stroked the mare's nose and whispered something soft in her own language. The mare responded with a gentle snort and leaned into her palm. "She is kind," Nayeli said. Like her owner, Samuel looked down, unsure how to handle such words. They stood together in the cold morning, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Nayeli took a deep breath. "I must tell you something before I go," she said. "Something true." Samuel raised his eyes slowly to meet hers. "When I arrived, I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of the cold, of being alone, of not reaching my family. But inside this house, you made those fears smaller. You gave me safety when I had nothing left." He listened closely, his heart steady but heavy. "And last night," she continued softly, "I felt something I had forgotten. The feeling of being protected, of not carrying everything alone." Samuel's chest tightened. He looked away for a moment, gathering himself. "You don't have to thank me for that," he said quietly. "Anyone would have done it." Nayeli shook her head slowly. "No, Samuel, not anyone. Not everyone opens their door to a freezing stranger. Not everyone shares warmth, shares trust, shares patience. You did." He looked at her again, and for a moment the world seemed still. Nayeli then said, a voice soft but firm, "If I return someday, will you welcome me again? Even if it is many moons from now?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. He felt something inside him settled, something warm, something hopeful. "Yes," he said finally. "My door will always be open for you." Her eyes softened, shining with a quiet emotion. She stepped closer and placed her hand gently on his arm. Not bold, not demanding. Just a simple, heartfelt gesture filled with gratitude and connection. "Then I will come back," she said. Samuel helped her mount the horse carefully. The mare stood calm beneath her, as if knowing she carried someone important. Nayeli gathered her blanket and adjusted her grip on the reins. Before she rode off, she looked down at Samuel one more time. "You changed my journey," she said. "And you changed something in me. I hope I changed something in you too,
You did.
Samuel replied honestly. She smiled with warmth deep enough to melt the cold morning air, then she gently nudged the mare forward. The horse walked through the snow, leaving soft prints behind. Nayeli rode toward the distant hills, her silhouette growing smaller against the bright white land at the top of a small rise. She stopped, turned her head, and looked back at Samuel. She raised her hand slowly in farewell. Samuel lifted his hand in return. Then she rode on, disappearing behind the snowy ridge. For a long time, Samuel stood there watching the empty trail. The wind brushed past him softly, almost kindly. His ranch felt different now, lighter, warmer, not because someone had stayed, but because someone had cared. He walked back to his house, closing the door gently behind him. Inside, the fire still burned, filling the room with warmth that felt richer than before. Samuel sat down near the flames and realized something simple and true. For 8 years, he'd lived alone, and in only a few days, a lost woman had brought life back into the quiet corners of his home and into the quiet corners of his heart. He didn't know when she would return, but for the first time in many years, he hoped for something, and hope in that silent house felt like the beginning of a new life.